Back again YouTube, and welcome back to another video. And this one is going to be, well, it's going to be a short video because we're going to be implementing some core configuration files. I mean, we've talked about these quite a lot, but now is the time. Now I feel like it's a time to start creating some configuration files and start implementing them within our core, whilst at the same time making it so that we're not overriding user-defined configuration when we come to update or core files. So I want to keep some kind of separation, and at the same time have the user configuration dictates how the core function behaves. So we're going to be implementing that, and you can see I've got a config directory which is outside of the source directory, which means it's in the document root of our project, and I'm going to leave it right there for now. But as I said, when we come to start testing these, we're going to see how they behave, and depending on how they're behaving, we're going to be moving stuff around. So again, testing is not far off. We're going to be actually firing up our XAMPP server, and we're going to start testing some of these core functions, or start testing some of these core files that we've been writing and trying to clean them up and sort of like get rid of any errors here and there. So we're going to be going through that very, very shortly. So the first config file I want to create is our session.yaml file. So I'm going to say session.yaml, right? You can see we've already got an app, something that I think we've created from day one. It's empty at the moment, but we're going to create this session.yaml, and we're going to populate it, and we're going to create a few more. Then we're going to actually go into the core functions. Then we're going to go over what they're actually doing. So the first one I'm going to create is, and call it a session name, and note the YAML syntax. It's pretty much like key value pairs. So we'll define a key and we'll set the value. That's pretty much what it is. It gets a little bit more complex when we're sort of like working with multi-dimensional arrays, but I will show you how you lay that out. So we'll set a key called session name, and we can give that session a name. We could do it from in this YAML file, and the user will be able to define this when setting up your project or your application. And note that there's no semicolon. It's just the key name, colon, and you could either do it in quotes, or you could leave the quotes out. And the next one I think is lifetime, because we set this lifetime in our session component. So we're going to be declaring some of these, then passing in this session file in our session factory, because that requires this session array. And to set that to 0, and path, set that to the current path, domain, set that to empty, and secure, and say false, and HTTP only, I'm going to say true. I think we've also got GC, or garbage collector, max lifetime, and I'm going to set that to 1800. And again, we will go through this in more details when we come to sort of like working with what they're actually doing. This one is GC probability, that is set to 1000. Again, you see I've got an error right here because I've got a comma. Don't need a comma. And GC defines set that to 1, and we've got use cookies, set that to 1, which is equivalent to true, basically. Right, so that's as much as we're going to do in the session YAML for the time being. And note that it's simple key value pair. That's all it is at the minute. We will be doing some sort of like multi-dimensional array or equivalent in YAML, which I will show you in a bit. So let's create a next config file. I'm going to call this our database configuration, database.yaml. So at this point, I actually want to show you the PHP equivalent to what we're actually going to be creating. It's a simple 2-dimensional array, and it goes like this. I'm going to say driver equal, open up that array. I'm going to give the first key, I'm going to call it MySQL, which is going to be a next array that contains the DSN, right? Contains the username, and the password, right? So that's one item in this driver array. To add a second item, I'm going to do a comma, then PG SQL, open brackets, I'm going to say DSN, username, password. Now this is the semicolon. Now this is the PHP equivalent to what we're going to actually write in the YAML file. So you can, I'm going to leave this in while I write the YAML equivalent, which is what we're going to use, because we've got a YAML component from Symfony which is going to parse it back down to what you can see right here. Now you could be saying why go through all the trouble? Remember that this is learning, guys. We're learning how to implement and integrate different within our project. It's not a matter of just, yeah, because that looks easy, we're going to just implement it. We could, there's nothing wrong with going with PHP configs, but in order for us to be exposed to all of these different texts, we're going to be using the YAML configuration, which is simply going to parse down to what you can see in front of you right here. So I'm going to do the YAML bit, and then you can see exactly the difference. So let's be driver colon, tab down once and tab over, yeah. So MySQL colon, enter down again and tab once, say DSN, put a quote. Note that I don't actually need a quote. I will only use quotes if I'm going to leave a key empty. If I'm not adding no value, I'll leave quotes. But if I'm going to add a value, I would not leave quotes in it. Actually, let's just do it. It's going to be MySQL colon host equal localhost semicolon, then it's going to be DB name, and we haven't got a DB name yet, so I'm going to say DB name equal test, and I like to put the char set onto the string as well, so I'm going to say char set equal UTF-8 MB4, right? And there's no comma in YAML like you see with the PHP equivalent. We've got the comma, there's no comma whatsoever. So we're going to jump down to the next line, which is going to be in line with this DSN, and that's going to be username colon, and it's going to be root, because on our development server the username is always root. I'm going to drop down again and say password colon. I'm going to use these quotes because there's no password. The password field on my development server is not required, so I'll leave it empty. So this is where I'm going to use an empty quote. Now to apply the second item in this array, I'm going to drop down, I'm going to tab back to the left, so I'm in line with this MySQL, say PGSQL colon, drop down, tab over, DSN, MySQL, nope, it should be PGSQL host equal localhost db name equal test char set equal utf 8 mb4. So username is root, and password again just some empty quotes, and that's it. That's as simple as it gets with when you're working with YAML file, and that's an exact equivalent to this PHP array down at the bottom, right? That's how you write YAML configuration files. It's I think the syntax looks a bit cleaner, you know. I mean, nothing wrong with that, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But again, we're learning how to implement different technologies, and we're sort of like putting it in or integrating it into our project, so we can say that we've used YAML and it's got a nice clean syntax. I'm just going to save that file and close it out. Right now, back in our app file, I can actually, in our app YAML file, I can actually say define the driver that we want to use for our database. And again, I could have put it in this database file. I could have, but I'm going to put it into our app YAML file for the time being. I'm going to say database driver, and we can define that driver right there. And by default, I'm going to say it's MySQL, right? And I'm going to leave that app config as it is for now, because we're going to be building it out as we go along. So I just want to show you guys how we declare these configs, how we go about writing inside of them, and how we go about setting out our configurations. And we're going to be implementing that into our core files in the next video. So please stay tuned for that, guys. It's going to be dropping very shortly. Thanks. Bye.